make your way to your seats and maybe finish up some of those conversations. We're going to get into service this morning. If you are new to our church and you're wondering how you can give to our church, you can either drop your cash or your checks into the back, or we have a brand new way of giving, or not brand new, we've had it for a while. But if you text that number right there, it'll actually send you to that link at the bottom where you can set up either reoccurring giving or one-time gifts, whatever is best for you. There's different giving options in there. You can either give to the building fund, tithes, offerings, missions, whatever. So you can have those there for you. What else do we have for announcements? Okay. Well, I'll just ad-lib then if we don't have it up. Okay, so we will not be live streaming for now due to technical difficulties. Instead, we'll be recording and uploading it on Monday. We are going to be donating to the people that were harmed in the fire in town. I don't know if you guys heard about it or know about it. I'm sure all of us have by now, but unfortunately, there's a fire right next to Calgary Baptist Church, and a lot of families were affected, and it was really terrible. Mostly what they need right now is men's clothing, large to extra large, shoes 11 and 12s, boy clothes 7 to 8, and then size 1 shoes. They need toys, women's clothing. They need 2XL tops, top size pants, 7 to 8 shoes. And honestly, one of the best things that we can do is just give them food gift cards. To coordinate this, that's my wife's number right there. Just call her or text her if you would like to drop something off at our church. If you walked in this morning, well, all of you walked in this morning, but you'll see in the, if you'll see in the kind of first corner right when you enter the church on the right-hand side where the Christmas tree was, that's where we're having all of our donations dropped off. So if you'd like to drop something off, either text me or Carolina so we can come to the church and get those dropped off for you. So March 6th, if you are a member at our church, and if you're not a member, or if you don't know that you're a member, come talk to me and I'll tell you if you are or not. That's not my opinion. We have a chart that says if you are or not. March 6th, you need to make it to the meeting. This is our annual business meeting where we are approving the money that we've spent last year, or just, I guess you guys, it's already spent, so voice whatever you want to say. If you were like, that's stupid, then that sucks. But yeah, so make it to the meeting. And also, so February 20th, so I think that's 2 or 3 Sundays from now, it's our annual Faith Promise Sunday. So what you're going to do is we're going to give you a card. You're going to fill it out how much you and God are going to have a conversation of how much you're going to give to our church for missions. And this is what we call faith missions, meaning I have the faith, or God has given me the faith to promise for the missions. So that Faith Promise Sunday, fill it out and then bring it to us the week after that. So that'd be February 26th, right? That's 7 days. 27th? 26th, because, yeah, whatever. Yep, it's going to be, no, if it was the 21st, wait, what? Yeah, 27th. I don't know why I'm trying. No, I'm just not doing math right. So the February 27th, you're going to bring back your filled out card, and that's going to help us establish what our budget is going to be for the year for our missions. Again, if you're not able to make it with us on Sunday, you can follow us on YouTube. This is where we're going to post our sermons. Also on Facebook. So follow us at AGC of Charles City, like and subscribe so that you are able to stay up to date with us when we post things throughout the week. And then follow us on Facebook as well at Amazing Grace Church in Charles City, Iowa. Okay, we are continuing our series this morning on obedient desire, what it looks like to truly follow Christ correctly. So something that we've been talking about for a while now is our goals. So what's our goals as a church? Become a disciple, right? We want to become a church of disciples who disciple others, who lead others to Christ. And then we want to repeat this process through church planning. One of the ways that we are doing this, in order to make this goal possible, we have to personalize it. Because if we don't personalize it, there's no stake in the game for us. If you just have a goal for an organization, but if the people don't rally behind it and make it personal to them, there's no way they're going to make the goal. So our goal as people is to become a better disciple of Christ and to look more like Jesus Christ. So we are doing 3 things to help us get there. We're calling it our 3 spiritual disciplines. That's the ministry of the word, ministry of prayer, and the ministry of the Spirit. The ministry of the word, this is where God reveals himself, his plans, and his heart for his people. The ministry of prayer, this is where we make that personal connection with God and where we strengthen our connection to one another. And the ministry of the Spirit, this is where we get to see the Spirit of God enter into our situations and begin to work both in our community and in our personal lives. Each of these has a personal and corporate part of it. So each of these, so for the ministry of word, this is your daily going through the word of God. And for each of these, you're going to set yourself a goal. Say, maybe I want to read the entire book of Leviticus. That's my goal. So that's what you're going to do. Every day, you're going to be reading the word. And in the corporate sense, this is what we're going to do on a Sunday when we open up the word of God together and God reveals himself to us. For the ministry of prayer, you can say, God, I want to pray more, or maybe I want to pray specific prayers, and that's your personal goal. And then together as a church on Sundays, after service, we're going to find somebody and we're going to pray with each other. Because when we meet spirit to spirit, it breaks so many spiritual bonds that are inside of our hearts. Because we're not meeting flesh to flesh where prejudices can come up, where preferences can come up. When we meet spirit to spirit, we're on the same playing field. There is no distinction among us. In the ministry of the Spirit, this is the exciting part. This is where you're asking God, God, fix things inside of me, or do new works in me. And in our corporate sense, this is where we get to see God move in our city and in our church. But God has to move here first before he moves here first in order to move outside of this church. It starts with us, then it's the church body as a whole, and then it's the community around us. Because all of us want to see our community change for the better. All of us want to see our nation change for the better. We see how horrible it is, and that's why we're advocating for this. God, we want to see you move. This is how it works. The ministry of the word, getting to know what God's plans are. The ministry of prayer, our connection to him. The ministry of the Spirit, where we lay ourselves down and we allow him to move in us. So again, set a goal for each of these for yourself. Write them down. Maybe afterwards, after service, maybe talk about them with somebody. Be like, hey, man, I'm really feeling convicted to pray certain prayers. Or, man, God is really working on me and I need to read Romans or something like that. Whatever it is for you, write these down. Get these in your heart so that you continually ask God to strengthen you in those areas. So continuing on this series, we're going to be preaching on striving pursuit this morning. The chief end of man is to glorify and enjoy God forever. God is most glorified in us when we are most satisfied in him. This is from John Piper's book, Desiring God. We were created with the intent to glorify God. God is timeless, and he existed before, and he created everything. He has always existed. He is not the one who was created. A question that we seldom ask that we should probably ask more is this: why did God create? For some of us, this isn't a subject that we maybe think about too much. Most of the time we talk about, if there's a deep question in our life, we say, what's the purpose for my life? But when we look at it in a completely far back look, why did God create in the beginning? God is creative by nature, and he longs to connect with the things that he creates. Creation is such an intimate process. When we create things, it comes from our innermost being. We graft a part of ourselves in our creation. Some of us who are more creatives understand this. Whether you're writing a story or drawing a painting or maybe just making something out of the materials, there's a part of you that is expressed like none other parts of you when you're creating. Creation is so deeply ingrained in us. It's so deep inside of us. We find this uncontrollable joy when we've created something. Or maybe for you, maybe you're not a creative type, but maybe you're a hard worker. It's the same kind of thing. Who's ever worked really hard during a day and afterwards they feel this well-deserved sense of pride? You're like, man, I worked really hard today. And you can go home and you're like, man, I knew I gave it my all. That's the same thing that it feels like when we create something. There's this immense joy, and there's this pride that you take in over it, to see something come from nothing. And this is truly where God started. When God existed before time, he lived in this void. It was just the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit dwelling together in complete unity and perfection, but there was nothing else. And then all of a sudden, he created life. He created planets. He created galaxies. He created the earth. And the Bible tells us he created it all in 7 days. Looking at God's creation, literally nothing coming into something. When God said, "Let there be light," the nothingness, the void obeyed him, and there was light. From God comes all things, and this is how God feels when he creates something, right? He is so overjoyed. He delights in the things that he created. But he doesn't stop there. He delights in us. He doesn't delight just to create things. He delights in the things that he's created. He longs to connect with us. What we sang this morning, Reckless Love, it talks about how God is willing to chase after his creation, how much he loves his creation, the lengths and the width that he goes to. And I can give you story of looking how God does this. So when we see this God going to beautiful lengths to save us, does this sound like a God that loves his people? Absolutely, right? God loved us so much that he became human to dwell with us. This God who is outside of the material world became material to be with us. And he came for 2 reasons. Number 1, to be with us, and number 2, to make a way where we could dwell with him forever. God pursues his people. Because God created us, there's this unique pride in his work and a strong love for the things he created. God pursues his people. When you're looking for a mate, do we look at that potential mate and do we love it when they sit back and they show new enthusiasm in us? Do we crave those who are apathetic towards us, who are low energy when it comes to us? Do we love it when we are chasing after somebody and they show no interest in us? No. When we are looking for attractiveness, when we're looking for a mate, we look for somebody who pays attention to us. The most attractive thing about a person is how they treat us and how they make us feel. Relationships are built by mutual affection and mutual effort. Anything else is not a relationship. If you think that you're in a relationship and they're not paying attention to you, they're not putting as much effort into you, there's no relationship there. And this doesn't have to be in a romantic setting. If you're with a friend and they show no interest in you, is there really a friendship going on? Is there really a connection going on? Absolutely not. Nobody likes to compete for others' attention, right? Especially in our day and age when you have so many devices that you can be looking at. Nobody likes to speak and not be listened to. There's so many things that catch our interest and so many things that are actually important that can draw our attention away from other things. And this is especially harmful when it comes to our relationship with God. We don't like to compete for the attention. We feel belittled, we feel passed by, and sometimes we even feel betrayed. Nowhere is it more prevalent than in romantic relationships. If we feel or sense a competition in that romantic relationship, there's lots of pain and anguish. Look at it like how we view taxes. You have a family, you have hobbies, you have work, and you have so many things going on in your life that sometimes you can forget to file your taxes. But if you forget to file your taxes, bad things are going to happen to you, right? The government's going to come after you. They're going to say, "How did you get all this money?" You're like, "Oh, I don't know. I didn't do my taxes." And they're going to get really angry with you. When we feel that we deserve attention and don't receive it, it's deeply painful. And sometimes this can result in serious consequences. But when you think about it, you have to give your attention to so many things. You have hobbies, you have work, you have family, you have friends. There's so many things going on in your life that you have to pay attention to. And to give your attention to one thing is to take it away from something else. Okay, I just want you to imagine for a second, for those of us who are married, let's say that your house is really messy, but you haven't connected with your spouse in a while. Let's say there's some downtime, and you can either choose to go clean the house or connect with your spouse. To give attention to one means that you're not going to give attention to the other. And you have a duty for both. And this goes into so many things in our life. Sometimes for some of us, we work on our phones. So if somebody's trying to call us, but we're having a conversation with somebody in person, we have to make a conscious decision, either to ignore the person that we are talking to or to ignore the person on the phone. There's so many things that are competing for our attention. But it's interesting, this is what Jesus has to say. Matthew chapter 6, verse 33. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. You can reread it like this. But seek God first. Give God your attention first, and all those other things that you need to pay attention to or want to pay attention to, they will be taken care of as well. Instead of coming down hard on us, Jesus turns us into a positive. If you seek me first, all those things that you're worried about, all those things that you're responsible for, all those things that you want to do, all those things that you have to do, those people that you need to be with in your life, all of it will be taken care of. Your hobbies won't die. You'll have enough time for your spouse, and your work won't suffer. When Jesus says all these things shall be added to you, he's saying if you put God's kingdom first and do not think that your physical well-being is a worthy objective to live your life for, you actually are able to do those things with joy. If we don't make ourselves our primary concern and we make Christ our primary concern, we get to actually enjoy the life that we're living. When we go to work, we're actually able to enjoy it. We're going to enjoy our hobbies because we don't feel so tied to them, because we know that we put our priorities correctly. We know that when we put God first in our lives, everything else can be taken care of. So when you get back into that emotion of feeling like there's competing distractions, competing things that are coming after your attention, if you seek God first, everything else is going to take care of itself. There's this choice to seek the kingdom of God. It's the fundamental choice that everybody makes when they first repent and are converted. Yet day after day after that, us as Christians, we have to continually make that choice over and over and over. So to restate that, when you first come to God, you have to make that decision. When you meet God himself, you have to make that decision, either seeking him first, putting him first over your life, which means you're Christian. But then every day after that, you have to make that same decision over and over and over. I can do these other things that I have to do, or I can spend time with God. And guess what? When I do that, all those things I have to do, you'll be able to do them. Because God sees, and he is the ultimate understander of our situation. He's the best person. He sees you, and he knows all the things that you have to do. He's not going to tell you to ignore your responsibilities, for he's the one who gave you them in the first place. But what he's asking you this morning is, will you put me first so that I can help you with those responsibilities? And the writer of Hebrews even takes this a step further. Hebrews chapter 12, 1 through 3. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles us. And let us run with perseverance the race that is marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and the perfecter of our faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, he scorned its shame, and he sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. So on the one hand, yes, if you seek the kingdom of heaven first, all the things that you need will be taken care of. On the other hand, there are definitely things in our lives that get in the way of us pursuing God. And in this chapter, he says there's sins in our lives that keep us from running this race. Instead of running the race, we're focused on other things. And some of these things are bad for us, but some things aren't. Sometimes you have hobbies that tend to get in the way. It doesn't have to be these dreadful sins that you're committing, but sometimes there are. There are meaningless stuff that get in your way. There are important stuff that get in your way. And then there's bad stuff that gets in our way. The writers of Hebrew is saying, why don't we just throw off all of it and so that we can chase even faster? When he says we are surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses, he's referring to these heroes of faith that he spoke to in the chapter before. They are not witnessing our actions. Rather, the actions that they did in their life witnesses to us how to follow God. And it shows the faithfulness of God himself. And it shows their striving commitment to follow him. For us, I want you to take a minute and I want you to think about some of the heroes of faith in your life. My mind goes back to my grandmother, who advocated for her family while her husband was addicted to alcohol. My mother was in a very unsafe situation. Sometimes her father would come home and beat her other siblings. But my grandmother stayed true, and she stuck with him the entire time. She advocated for her husband, and she advocated for her family the entire time. She stayed faithful to the Lord. Last month, the former superintendent of the fellowship, the Assemblies of God, who we adhere to, passed on to be with Jesus. Under his care, the Assemblies of God grew to becoming the most strong Pentecostal denomination in the world. We are the largest Pentecostal denomination in the world with over 69 million members worldwide. The great deeds done before us mark the doers as witnesses of what we are able to accomplish now. So what Paul is saying in this chapter is there are people in heaven that have done so much for the Lord. So using that as witnesses to us of why we should chase, why we should throw off everything and continue to run as fast as we can. The writer, he says to rip off everything and tells us to sprint towards Jesus. It tells us to run with perseverance. If you know, is anybody a runner in here? Probably not. I'm not a runner, but if you talk to runners or if you read about runners, they have this thing called the runner's high. They run so long and so hard that their body actually hits this kind of state of flow where they no longer feel the pain because they're running so hard. That's how we're supposed to run in this race. Where we run it for so long, we run so hard after God that all those things that we feel like we're missing out on, we feel like, yeah, I'm missing out on it. I don't want to have it. Because you're chasing after Jesus. And speaking of Jesus, in verse 2, he said, for the joy set before him. Jesus knew what he was going to go through. He knew he was going to go to the cross, which was the most ashamed thing that can happen to a person. When the Romans would kill prisoners, they would put them on these crosses, which it looks like that. So they strap your arms to the sides, and they strap your head to the top and your feet to the bottom. And they would put it on major highways so that everybody would see what happens to people who deny Rome. They did these to traitors. They did these to stealers. They did this to anybody who they thought was worthy of this punishment. But it was a declaration to everyone else that you don't mess with Rome. And to be thrown up on a cross, everybody would see you. Your parents would walk that street and see your corpse. Think about maybe your children being on a cross. Think about how shameful it is. Think about how disgusting it is. But the writer of Hebrews said, Jesus scorned the shame. He didn't care. He didn't think about it. He didn't care what it costed him because he knew the joy at the end. He knew that if he ran as hard as he could, he'd be sitting at the right hand of the Father. And here's something for us today. The story of Jesus serves both as a standard for us to live, but also our inspiration of how to live. Because Jesus made it very plain and simple. He said to the disciples, "You will do greater things than me on this earth." Jesus said, "I'm only going to be here for 33 years. Some of you are going to be here for a lot longer. You're going to save a lot more people than I did." Because the same power that is within Jesus is the same power that's within us. Jesus said, "I'm going to serve as your template. You take the message further." Because Jesus was going to be walking with us the entire way. He's the perfecter of our faith. He is the pre-runner of our faith. He is our faith. But he's telling us, you can do things that you don't think were possible. Because the same spirit that was within Jesus is the same spirit that's within us. Again, talking to that cloud of witnesses. They're witnesses to us of what we are able to do. So why would we let anything get in our way of this race? Why would we let anything in our lives that's not helping us stay? We're going to end with this passage this morning, Matthew chapter 13. The background to this passage sees Jesus speaking to a large crowd near and around his hometown. Jesus does something rather peculiar in this sermon. He chooses to speak to the crowds exclusively in parables, which are little stories that direct us to a spiritual truth. He did this because he did not want the people to understand his message. This is really strange. Jesus said, he told the disciples afterwards, "I speak to them in parables so that they will not understand." And the passage that we're going to read, Jesus uses a few different parables to show what the kingdom of heaven is like. And again, he did this so that the people wouldn't understand. Matthew chapter 13, 44 through 46. "The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again, and with joy in his heart, he sold everything he had so that he could buy that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for fine pearls, and when he found one of great value, he went away and he sold everything he had and he bought it." You might be wondering, why did Jesus tell these people this message in parables? Why didn't he want the people to understand? The parable we just read kind of explains the answer to us. The two men in this parable found a great treasure. Instead of leaving it or maybe taking it by force, they sold everything in order to get it. Those who find the kingdom have no regard for anything else. The first man of the story, when he sees this treasure in the field, he doesn't look at his own possessions. He's like, "Oh, that's a great collection. That's a great thing to add to my collection." He says, "It's worth everything. Everything I have before this no longer matters to me. This field with this treasure, that's what matters to me now." With the other person for the other merchant who's dealing in fine pearls, this is his livelihood. His livelihood is to buy and sell pearls, but he found one of great value. And he said, "All these other pearls, my business doesn't matter to me anymore. This pearl matters to me now." Those who find the kingdom have no regard for anything else. The crowds are now put into the shoes of these two men. And instead of selling everything and going up to him and ask him to explain it, to inquire of God, what does this mean? Instead, they left the treasure. And they just stood there and they acted confused. Jesus was the treasure that they were seeking after. But when they found Jesus, they did nothing with him. It says later on that they were offended by him. Again, this is happening in Jesus' hometown and around it. These people knew Jesus. They grew up with Jesus. They knew him as a person. They said, "Who is this man?" They considered him nothing. But unlike the crowds, the disciples continually asked him, "Teacher, what do these parables mean?" They pulled him aside. They said, "Jesus, this is your biggest crowd that you've ever preached to. Why are you talking to them so that they don't understand? What do these parables mean?" They were begging Jesus to tell him what these parables meant. The disciples are now placed in the shoes of these two men in the parables. They found Jesus, and these men literally left everything to follow him. Nobody in the crowd came up to Jesus and asked him, "What did this mean?" Nobody cared. Because what the people were after is what Jesus could do for me. But what the disciples were after is, Jesus is my treasure. Jesus is not going to give me my treasure. Jesus is my treasure. And they left everything to have him. The crowds didn't. The multitudes of people that Jesus spoke to didn't. They went back to their homes. They didn't seek after Christ and ask him to explain the things he said. They didn't care because Jesus wasn't what they expected. Again, these people knew him. They lived with him. They went to school together. They didn't look at him as the treasure that they were looking for in their life. Have you heard the expression, "Find your passion and never work another day in your life"? It's the same way with the kingdom of heaven. We don't want to pursue God so many times because we feel like it's this strenuous journey of we have to follow God. We look at God as this person who tells us what to do and what not to do. For us, it's hard to follow Jesus because we don't find any joy in it. But this isn't the reality of the situation. Like we've said many times, God is life, and apart from him is death. In the same way, God is joy, and apart from him is just fleeting happiness that comes and goes. The crowds would always go to another teacher, but the disciples stuck with Jesus because they didn't find the person of, "I have to live this way. He's telling me of how to live, the do's and the don'ts." They found their joy, and they decided to pursue him. Everywhere Jesus went, they went with him. Everything Jesus did, they did with him. They left everything because they saw what they could have with Jesus. And when they saw that, nothing else in their life mattered anymore. Going back to that passage in Hebrews, these disciples threw off everything so that it wouldn't hinder them running after God, pursuing God with everything they had. The reason why I called this sermon Striving Pursuit, because it should get us into this mood and understanding of that striving, that constant going, and maybe sometimes we're going and we fall down. But when we're striving after something, we're getting back up and chasing after it even more. And striving means we're pushing ourselves to the limit to pursue after God. That's striving toward our life's end, to glorify God and to enjoy him forever. Going back to that quote that we began the service with, the chief end of man is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. God is most glorified in us when we are most satisfied in him. So our life's purpose is to glorify him. God is most glorified in us, meaning living out our life's purpose, when we are most satisfied in him, when we are enjoying him, when we're spending that time with him. That's when God is truly glorified. When we look at God this morning, we shouldn't see this judge on top of us who's going to hit us with a gavel. We should see this Father who wants a relationship that we find giving us more life than anything else. And when we seek after God, He comes to us. We read the passage a few weeks ago. Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you shall find. Knock and the door will be open for you. Jesus longs to have this relationship with you. What we're doing this morning is we showed you God is reaching out to us. And the rest of the sermon, we're telling everybody why we should be reaching back. Having that relationship, taking those two people. For some of us, we didn't know the first part. Maybe we didn't know that God loves us. Maybe we didn't know that God is pursuing after us. But He is. He's reaching out His arm. So for you this morning, are you going to reach back and chase after Him? But it starts with, you have to ask yourself, is Jesus my treasure that I'm willing to throw everything else out the window for? It even says, if you seek me first, all those other things in your life that you need and you're worried about, I'm going to take care of you. Your life won't waste away. I will take care of you. So with that, this morning, I'm going to pray us out, and then I want you guys to find a person to pray with. But before we do that, we're going to take communion together. I think this may be a perfect way for us to kind of visualize what it's like to have Jesus being our treasure. Okay, so if you guys would like to come up and take a single file line, if you guys would like to take communion, please come up and grab the elements this morning. Hey Josh, you can stop the recording if you want.